Caption testing 1, 2, 3. Caption testing 1, 2, 3. Hey, Josh, mic check.
Mic check.
Yep, you're coming through.
Okay. I'm gonna go run to the control room, get that one going.
Sounds good. Hey, Josh, can you hear me in control room?
Yes, I can hear you in the control room.
Okay, when you get back to chambers, if you press, I can't remember, it's either number 1 or number 2 button, you'll have the preset for the Dias camera.
Okay, awesome. I got all of the PowerPoints opened except for two. It wouldn't let me open because it says people are currently working on
Okay, don't worry about it.
them. Okay, I will head into there now and get the camera set up.
Cool.
Get mute it.
Might be that. We could do that too.
One man, you got me, yeah.
What is?
Oh, it's our accreditation. We're
Nice.
doing, presentations.
So we have work to do.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can certainly discuss best. Processes. It's all right.
No,
How are you doing? Well, sir. You can, so, yeah. That's true.
Hey, Josh, can you turn on the chambers? There you go. Never mind. Oh, you know what? Go ahead and put no background
Yeah.
on that on the chambers camera.
What? Yeah.
So on the start video button on the caret, go choose virtual background
Saw which to detail.
and then choose none.
We did all the things. It's awesome.
So lower left on Zoom, you should see on the start video button. Yeah. And then click on none. And then start your camera. There. Yep. Perfect. You're good.
You decided.
Yeah, I like it.
Sat there and. You said.
Yeah. I think.
Hey, Josh,
Yes.
can you go to the touch? Can you hit the mute on the lower left? And also make sure the touch screen is turned off too. Hey. To your left, the touch screen. By the make sure those are both red. Yeah. And then right when you're ready to go, just hit them both green. And then make sure on the Zoom mic, that one is Hey, David, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. I understand you have a presentation for tonight,
I do, yes.
and will you just share your screen?
No, it'll just be me on video, just reading a brief statement.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect. Just wanted to check in.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks. Diego, is that you?
Hello. Yes, it is.
Ah, great. You will make the announcement tonight, I presume?
Yes. And I'll be joined by a colleague of mine, Alonzo.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Dan, are we recording? Thank you. Good evening. It is February 21, 5:30 p.m. And this is the City Council meeting. I'm Barb Noseworthy, your mayor, and can we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Baxter,
Present.
Councillor Bosman's.
Here.
Here. And Mayor Noseworthy.
Present, thank you. Next on the agenda, does our host have the translator queued up?
Yes, Mayor, we have Diego available for the presentation.
Please go ahead, Diego, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Diego Pons here today with my colleague Alonso on behalf of the Community Language Cooperative, CLC as usual. Thanks for having us at your meeting. The organizers of the meeting continue making a commitment towards linguist justice. All this means is that we're here to help create a space for people to participate and to engage in the language of their heart, just simply the language that you each feel most comfortable in. We're going to continue using simultaneous interpretation here today to help create the space in English and in Spanish. Once I finish saying this in English, I'll repeat the instructions in Spanish. At that moment, we start the interpretation. When interpretation is on, you'll be able to see that globe icon that says interpretation there on the bottom right-hand corner of your computer screen. Please select that globe icon when you see it pop up, and please select your preferred language. If you happen to be joining today's meeting on your cell phone or your tablet, I'll instead ask you to please look for the More button or the 3 dots button in order to select your preferred language that way. So if you're not fully bilingual, we'll encourage you to select your preferred language. So you may utilize the interpretation here on Zoom. If someone were to speak in the opposite language, if you are bilingual, then you can just feel free to listen to everyone in their original language. Once you select your language, You can always check mute original audio, so you don't have to be hearing both languages at the same time. As always, we like to remind all people, just please pay attention to the speed in which you're speaking. Just please make sure that you're speaking at a conversational pace, and please make sure that you do not pick up your reading speed. So thank you so much for that. Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Mi nombre es Diego Pons. Estoy aquí hoy con mi colega Alonso de parte de la Cooperativa Comunitaria de la Justicia del Lenguaje, CLC. Gracias como siempre por invitarnos hoy a su reunión. Los organizadores de esta reunión se han comprometido hoy a servir la justicia del lenguaje. Lo que eso significa, como siempre, es que queremos crear un espacio para que todas las personas puedan participar e involucrarse en el idioma de su corazón, simplemente el idioma en el que todas las personas se sientan más cómodas. Vamos a continuar hoy utilizando la interpretación simultánea aquí en Zoom para poder crear este espacio en inglés y en español. Cuando yo termine de decir esto, se va a activar la interpretación. Ya cuando esté activada la interpretación, usted va a poder observar un icono de un globo terráqueo que dirá interpretación ahí abajo en la derecha de su pantalla. Seleccione por favor ese icono de globo cuando aparezca y por favor seleccione su idioma preferido. Pero si usted está asistiendo hoy a esa reunión en su celular o en su tableta, yo le voy a pedir que por favor busque la opción que dice More, que quiere decir más, o posiblemente el botón de 3 puntos para que pueda seleccionar su idioma preferido de esa manera. Si usted no es completamente bilingüe, le voy a pedir que por favor seleccione su idioma preferido para que pueda utilizar la interpretación cuando ya esté hablando en el otro idioma. Si usted sí es bilingüe, se puede sentir libre de escuchar a todos en su idioma original. Y como siempre, cuando usted seleccione su idioma, puede hacer clic en silenciar el audio original para no escuchar ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Diego. I will start with a statement. It is a land acknowledgement that is my statement, does not represent individual council views or the council as a whole. For thousands of years, this region was home to numerous people, bands, tribes, and nations. Each had their distinct culture, artistic expression, and community mores. In particular, this region was the ancestral home of the Nuchu, Dene, Pueblo, Hopi, multiple Apache bands, and various other tribes and Latinx people who used and stewarded this land. I recognize that indigenous peoples were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands by the US government. It is important to recognize that the narrative of this region has mostly been told from the dominant perspective without recognition of those who came before us and who to this day continue to thrive, create, and connect with this land. Thank you for your respect in my acknowledging this legacy. Thank you. So let's get started with our agenda. We have an identification of actual or perceived conflicts of interest. Does anyone on council have an item that's going to be on the agenda that they may have a perceived or actual conflict? All right, let's go forward. Presentations, I believe Jose did, proclamation of the presentations. Chief Bramer, I know you're coming up, but City Manager, did you need to do an introduction of all of this?
Just a really proud achievement for the Durango Police Department, and very excited to have an exceptional police department here at the City of Durango and have Chief Bob Bramer give an update and a presentation to the council.
Great. And for council's information, I did share with the chief that we'd be happy to come down and have a photo after they've received their presentation. We love photos.
Good evening,
Some
Mayor.
people even get them up on Facebook.
Yes, exactly. We are waiting for Chief Kraus from the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police. He had to join us virtually this evening. The impending storm, we didn't want to drive down Fruta, so. He's gonna actually do the presentation on that behalf. Thank you. I apologize for the time.
Well, what
Hey,
I'll
Chief.
take the opportunity, as I promised I would, to remind everyone in the public, please lock your cars,
Thank you.
please. There's an epidemic going around and we can all help. Lock your cars.
David, if you want to unmute yourself, you can let them know you're here.
Okay, yeah, I am here. Thank you. Mayor and council, I appreciate the invitation to attend tonight virtually. I apologize for not being there in person, as Chief Bramer mentioned. As is often the case here in Western Colorado, the weather was a bit unpredictable. So with the potential of some weather moving in, this seemed like the best, safer bet for tonight. So appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm David Kraus. I'm the Chief of Police with the Fruita Police Department. But tonight I'm here representing the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police to recognize the Durango Police Department for their successful reaccreditation. I was fortunate to be able to serve as an assessor for the association's Professional Standards Committee, which handles department accreditations. And just to give you a brief glimpse into what a CACP accreditation entails, it requires agencies to provide proof of compliance with 213 individual standards or to show why the standard is not applicable to that agency. These standards run the gamut from the types of reflective markings required on patrol vehicles to very significant issues such as use of force or search and seizure guidelines. Agencies have to show through policy and practice that they are in compliance with those CACP standards, which involves submitting volumes of documentation as well as an on-site visit from assessors. The process isn't an easy one, and it can be very time-consuming. And those of us who serve as assessors take our responsibilities very seriously to ensure that this isn't just a rubber stamp process. It's meaningful, and we aim to maintain that meaningfulness. And with that, sometimes it results in us asking even more work of the departments and their staff to provide us with documentation. And Commander Dunlop, as the project manager for DPD, along with his staff, including Tammy Barger, who I know did a lot of heavy lifting, and of course, Chief Brammer, the command staff, and all of the employees who had a hand in the accreditation process in one way or another are to be commended for their hard work that they put into this process. Given DPD's excellent reputation, I can say I wasn't surprised by the level of professionalism I found there, but nonetheless, I was certainly very, very impressed. I know the citizens of Durango enjoy the dedication and professionalism displayed by members of their police department every day. But accreditation by an external entity such as the CACP helps to legitimize and recognize the agency's commitment to maintaining the highest professional standards and best practices. So it sounds like from a previous comment that you're very proud of your police department, and that is very much warranted. So on behalf of the CACP, I'd like to once again congratulate Chief Brammer and the Durango Police Department on their successful reaccreditation and their demonstrated excellence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd really like to recognize the people that actually did all the real work on this one and actually made this happen. So if I could bring up Commander Dunlop, Sergeant Schwein, and Tammy Barger. And I'd like to present them on behalf of our department and the CACP, our accreditation certificate, which will probably be hung within our organization's walls. And hopefully it will be transferred over to new walls in a short order at some point. So. Tammy did most of the work. She was fantastic on this process. She was instrumental in going through all the policies, procedures, and checkoffs and everything else. So thank you very much.
Kept everything organized and coordinated with Chief.
I think let's come down to your points. Because Tammy, is there anything you
Probably let the guys talk.
Was a good learning experience to learn all of them. That was a good way to dive into all the policies and all of our SOPs and learn them. It's a good experience.
Let's come down to get a photo. Let's do it.
Just a break.
You want to get in there, Chief?
Pulse around.
Chair out of the
Yeah,
way.
get the chair out of the way, front down. And Chief in here. Yes.
Let me see, let me do it tall.
Yeah, Jose.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, officers. Thank you. The next section of our agenda is public participation. And this section of the agenda is set aside for the public to provide 3 minutes of comments or ask questions regarding items that are not scheduled for a hearing or public testimony, or that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. City Council will not respond to questions from the dais. Citizens should address their comments directly to the City Council. As this is a virtual meeting, the avenues for public participation have been adjusted. All written comments received by the city clerk by noon today have been delivered to council and will be summarized in the meeting minutes. We will start with folks present in the room who have signed up, and on the monitor, Tom, I believe, is our host tonight, will start a clock. It will have 3 minutes, and I will try to raise my hand at about 30 seconds, and that's kind of your cue to please try to wrap it up. We really do need to keep it to the 3-minute level. And then after we've heard from anyone in the room, we will go to a virtual and see if there's any participants that wish to have public comment. And that also will have the monitor, so I'll encourage you to look for that. So the first person on our agenda is, let me just make sure I got this, is Dick Cobb. If you'll come up. And Rick, I'm sorry.
Bad handwriting.
Yeah, I know, and it's my glasses. And just indicate if you're a resident of Durango or the county or elsewhere.
Yes, Rick Cobb, 276 Oxbow Circle in Three Springs. So during the last Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting, which was on February 8th, we were all surprised when the proposed board and commission's reorganization proposal was presented as a done deal happening in May. I have questions and concerns that the main goals of this reorganization, which appear to be efficiency, and the proposed methods to achieve those are at the expense of true effectiveness. So similar to the difference between simple and easy, more efficient doesn't necessarily translate to more effective. You present only the cost sides of the efficiency equation in the form of reduced staff hours and dollars. What about the corresponding decrease in the board member hours? There's going to be 10,000 less hours spent on these important topics. How's that going to translate to more value for the public? How does a reduction of 45 board members translate into increased transparency? Same for eliminating dedicated boards to oversee the use of dedicated tax funds. One person on the new financial oversight board is going to be the lead on the Parks and Rec capital improvement projects and making recommendations. One person, maybe I should apply for that and recommend everything be built in Three Springs. That's a lot of power in one person's hands. You state that 20% of the 2022 Parks and Rec Advisory Board topics will be covered by the new financial oversight board. The other 80% are supposed to be covered by the new services and operations board. Where's the SOB in the new future board state diagrams? I can't find it. Where are these non-financial topics like e-bike policy going to be discussed? And then separate from the content of the proposed board reorg is the way it was presented as a fait accompli to the Parks and Rec board. Some of the reactions of the board members who were hearing this for the first time, disrespected, slap in the face, insulting. What are we supposed to do for the next 4 months? We'd be starting our review of upcoming capital improvement projects now. That's not going to get started until May. Totally new board members? How's that possible? What are we even doing here? Should I resign? If the city doesn't value my time, why am I not spending that time with my family? I make a motion to end this meeting now. My impression was throwing the baby out with the bathwater, rather than summarily dismissing these board members who spent so much time over years on a volunteer basis to immerse themselves deeply in complex issues to make their best recommendations to council. You should be giving them medals. Well, I assume this wasn't the intent. Unfortunately, that's the result. So if there's ever a topic that needs more dialogue, I think this is it. What's the big push to get this done by May? Why not wait for a new council to be seated, actually get some public input before making this huge change in city governmental structure? Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Tom, could you please make certain that the time clock is on the screen showing? It came on at the very end, but I appreciate that.
Will do.
Next, okay, thank you. The next person on the agenda is Sweetie Marbury.
My name is Sweetie Marbury, and yes, I am a resident of Durango. For almost 50 years, I've been here and loved it as much as you love it. My concern tonight is the dismantling of the boards and commissions. Durango has a rich tradition of boards and commissions with volunteers who bring outstanding credentials and a wealth of experience to the table. Citizens have a place to present their public participation on a variety of issues. Robust discussions and public engagement is an asset to Durango. Staff time is important, but secondary to residents' engagement. So what is the rush? You heard it from the previous speaker. Nothing should happen until after the next city council election, and those new councilors have an opportunity to understand the function of the boards and commissions and to get their legs on the ground. And that takes usually about a year to get that understanding. The boards and commissions are a layer before the city council votes on any projects. They, as you know, have detailed agendas and deal with specifics that save city council time and energy. Boards such as infrastructure should never be combined with the planning commission. Streets, utilities, storm drains require a special knowledge, and that's what the board members bring. Parks and Recs has existed longer than any of you have lived in Durango. Natural lands, Parks and Recs, multimodal, and the infrastructure board deals with sales tax, the 205, the 2015, and the 2019 sales tax. And these boards should exist because the voters expect them to exist. These boards guide and evaluate all the projects. You are strangling voices by eliminating boards and commissions. City council can never handle the volume and the variety of issues covered by these volunteer boards. Where will the public go? Well, I know where they're going to go. They're going to come to you, Mayor Youssef, and stand right here and stand here for hours talking about trail maintenance and off dog leash and poo-poo on the trail. And that's something that the volunteer boards listen to. The former mayors of Durango will be sending the city council a letter against the dismantling of these boards and commissions. If you really want the public to trust you, then the city council must keep the boards and commissions for the residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next person speaking is Dave Woodruff.
Hello, councilors. My name is Dave Woodruff, and I'm a resident of Durango at 184 Saltbrush Street, fellow Three Springer. I just want to say that I appreciate the streets crew and the job that they're doing, especially have a storm incoming. Additionally, thanks to the trash and recycling teams that also braved the weather, and especially all of the construction projects that we have going around Three Springs. So to navigate those streets is hard enough in my truck. I can't imagine in a trash truck. Too often we focus on what needs to be done and a little on the successes and the small wins. So Jose, please give our thanks to the crews that keep our infrastructure running, the teams that keep our community safe, and the people who provide the services we take for granted operational. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah Kelly.
Good evening. I'm here also to talk about the changes, the proposed changes to the board, to the boards. The city of Durango's, my name is Sarah Kelly and I am a citizen of Durango, or a resident. I'm also the chairperson of the Multimodal Advisory Board, and the city of Durango's 2023 Multimodal Advisory Board disagrees with the council's recent direction to dissolve this board. The Multimodal Advisory Board, or MAB, has a vital role in progressing alternative transportation in Durango. Developing a comprehensive multimodal transportation network requires input from people at all social, economic, and ability groups in Durango and in the surrounding areas that the city serves. A multimodal specific board can see the big picture when city council and staff need to prioritize projects and identify holes in our multimodal transportation system. The current members of the MAB believe it would be premature to dissolve the board because Durango's multimodal transportation network still needs to be completed. The city should continue to support the Citizen Advisory Board to provide recommendations while developing our multimodal network. The MAB provides an essential platform for the public to comment on transportation issues. The MAB, meeting regularly to accept, vet, and prioritize public comment on multimodal projects, is a critical venue to have adequate and informed public input. Gathering and keeping this input up to date is better done by a board of informed citizens representing different user groups. We ask City Council to reconsider its proposal to dissolve the MAB, in favor of a proposed financial advisory board. Considering capital improvement projects represents a small portion of what we discuss. A financial advisory board that oversees all capital projects, not just transportation related ones, would significantly dilute the high level of customer service that the MAB provides. Furthermore, we acknowledge that the MAB can be improved and welcome the opportunity to work with City Council and city staff to identify ways to make the MAB more productive and efficient. Should City Council decide to dissolve the Multimodal Advisory Board, we ask City Council to consider the consolidation of the Multimodal Advisory Board, Natural Lands Preservation Board, and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board into one citizen board. And this letter, which we will also supply to you guys through the website, is signed by a majority of the members of the Multimodal Advisory Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Just for those that you have walked in, I do want to clarify, there are sign-up sheets for the specific public hearings tonight. Right now, we are just in general public comment. So can we check on the those participating virtually? Do we have anyone who's raised their hand?
We do not, Mayor.
Yeah, I'm going to ask just a second. And, anyone who may have come in late, do you wish to speak for public comment, not any of the specific public hearings? All right. Then we will see you. We will go to the city operational updates and let's talk about snow.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have Allison Baker, our Public Works Director, coming up to the podium as we're talking about an impending snowstorm that's coming in. We are asking for some assistance with residents in parking to help us easily or more easily plow the roads. So I'm going to hand it off to Allison to talk a little bit about what we're looking at asking for some help with.
Thank you. I'm Allison Baker, Public Works Director, and we figured the best way to make it not snow is to put out a news release that said it's going to snow. So Tom Sluice in the PIO office is putting out a request that's helping us work to improve some of our processes in snow removal. I think in January, we had a terrific effort, but the snow got ahead of us, and we're looking for process improvements as well as staff improvements, which we haven't accomplished. Staff increases in the meantime. But we want to really have focus on clearing ADA ramps quickly, updating our snow routes, and clearing curbside parking. I think we get through and open up the main lanes, the absolutely high priority work that has to be done for schools and emergency vehicles, those kinds of things. But we've still got some opportunities, and this will be a probably year-long process of trial and error as we work through. During the summer, we have roadways that need sweeping, and we need to improve the process on that to get curbside as well as the middle of the road. So this is something that I see starting. We're working with code enforcement, the transportation group, and parking, and also the police department obviously is a huge part of this conversation. But just seeing the snow coming in and seeing that it could last as long as till Friday, we went ahead with this press release this evening. So I wanted to go ahead and share that with you. Residential neighborhoods are requested to restrict curbside parking to help the city's public works department clear the streets of snow in anticipation of a winter storm that is forecast the evening of Tuesday, February 21st through as late as Friday of this week. Public Works anticipates snow plowing beginning tonight, potentially continuing through the week as weather requires. The department requests residential neighborhoods restrict curbside parking as follows: no parking on north or west sides of the streets on even dates, and no parking on south and east sides of the streets on odd dates. This is currently a voluntary request for a pilot program to test alternative street clearing that the street division will be working on implementing over the coming year. More details will follow later this spring, but your cooperation for this weather event would help us obtain useful information. Also, it's likely that we will receive over 2 inches of snow tonight and tomorrow, at which time currently designated snow routes will be activated, meaning all parking on both sides of those routes will be restricted and result in ticketing and towing as required to maintain safe access in the city. Thanks for your assistance and compliance. And while driving safely, enjoy our wonderful Colorado snow.
Allison, may I actually ask a question?
Yes, please.
On the parking on the west and north side on even days, if you're parking overnight, I'm
Which
trying to
day is it?
understand that. Which day is it then?
I think the only sane way to consider that is that if you're parking in the evening, that you're part of the 22nd, you're parking on the 22nd. And there wouldn't be an anticipation that you run out at midnight and move the vehicle, that it would stay if the storm started, that we would consider that the whole night. The 22nd to the 23rd would be the 22nd.
That's helpful. Thank you.
It's still
Nobody
good.
out at
Well,
2 o'clock in the morning to move their cars.
I certainly hope not.
So even days starts in the afternoon and evening, or morning and evening.
Correct.
Evening to the
Right.
next early morning. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll fine tune as we go. Thank you.
Yes, sure. City manager, I know you have another update.
Yes, we have an update on our destination management master plan outreach with Tom Sluice.
Let me get rid of that background. All right. Evening, counselors. Tom Sluice, Public Information Officer for the city. I also sit on the Visit Durango Board of Directors as the city's representative. Tonight's operational update is for the Destination Management Master Plan. And this is essentially just a document that's going to guide the city's sustainable marketing efforts for the next 10 years or so. and to ensure that those efforts are in alignment with the strategic plan as well as the community values. The contractor that the city hired, Jones LaSalle, is coordinating this effort, and they will be presenting a final version of the destination master plan in late summer. And right now they have been conducting research for the past couple of months on the area, and they will be meeting with stakeholders next week. Tonight, as a stakeholder, what we're looking for is for council to basically just provide any feedback or questions you may have specifically on this process, or any outcomes that were outlined in the agenda packet background that was presented earlier. So with that, we have a couple of JLL representatives. We have Bethany and Sharon. We also have Rachel from Visit Durango. So Bethany, if you just want to introduce yourself, we will open this up to counselors to any questions they may have.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bethany DeRose, Senior Vice President with JLL's Tourism and Destination Advisory Practice. Happy to be here this afternoon and get a first chance to be in front of you all. As Tom mentioned, we're working through our process now and looking forward to being in market next week for some focus groups and interviews, as well as ultimately being back to present this group with recommendations down the road. So happy to take questions from the group today. Again, really happy to be here. Bethany DeRose. I am leading the project for our JLL team. I'm joined by my colleague, Shireen Jafari, who's also on, and we are supported by a larger team on the research front. But Tom, happy to take questions or provide background as necessary, but really wanted to be a resource for everybody here today.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions? I think we're good. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are any other questions that come up over the course of our project, we are obviously working very closely with Tom and happy to facilitate questions as the project evolves. We will be in town next week, so we're eager and excited to meet everybody in person. So thank you again for the time this evening, and we look forward to working together.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in Durango. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Great. The next item on our agenda is the review of the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to allow the City Council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the council member requests an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item 9. May we have a reading of the consent agenda, please?
Yes, thank you. Items 8.1 through 8.3 are approval of minutes. 8.1 is from the City Council joint study session with 9R on January 31st, 2023. 8.2 is from the City Council joint study session with the Planning Commission on February 2nd, 2023. 8.3 is from the City Council study session on February 7th, 2023. Item 8.4 is discussion of possible action concerning a resolution authorizing an appropriation for the Colorado Department of Local Affairs Innovative Affordable Housing Planning Grant Program. And 8.5 is discussion and possible action concerning a resolution authorizing the submission of a Colorado Department of Local Affairs Innovative Housing Strategies Incentives Grant Program application.
Thank you. Does any counselor wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? With that, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
And is there any discussion? Then let's have this vote. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
Councilor Buell.
Yes.
Councilor Baxter.
Yes.
And Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes, thank you. All right, we go into the public hearing section of our agenda tonight. The first one is, I see Tony up here before his already, so good for you. Yeah, sorry. First one is a public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing a ground lease with Roots and Wings Aviation at the airport. And the way we will do this public hearing is we will hear from Tony. We will open the public hearing to see if there's any public comment. You'll be given 3 minutes. We'll also check in with those participating virtually to see if there's any public comment there. We will close the public hearing. And then if there's any one from any of the developers or the owners that wish to speak, we'll entertain any kind of comments from them. We wait for them to go to the end so that they can hear all comments from the public, is how we do that. And then council will then have questions of either you or the applicant. So.
Very good.
Go away, Tony. Go ahead, Tony. Not go away, take it away. That didn't come out the way it was. It was either take it away or go ahead.
I will go ahead. I'll go ahead and take it away. Good evening, Council. Tony Vicari, Aviation Director at the Durango-La Plata County Airport, here to conduct or provide background for a public hearing that's considering an ordinance authorizing a ground lease with Roots and Wings Aviation LLC at the airport. Quick summary here, Roots and Aviation LLC did submit a ground lease application and preliminary development proposal to the airport in February of 2022 to construct one new aeronautical hangar. This is known as Hangar T5 for the purposes of our discussion. That proposed development will occur in our North General Aviation area at the airport, and it would propose to develop one hangar as noted, which is a nested T hangar, which is actually 8 subunits within one larger hangar. Overall dimensions about 200 feet by 50 feet in that North GA area. So over the last year, the developers worked to our pre-construction activities. Those are now complete. And the next step is today, which is moving forward with a public hearing in advance of a potential ground lease with that applicant prior to construction. Here's a quick overview looking at the location. As noted, this is our North General Aviation area. For those that are familiar, this shot is north of the terminal, also north of the air tanker base, just off of County Road 309A. On this map here, you can see the red circle, which is centering on the proposed development area. You can see on the right-hand side of that circle, there's another hangar there. It's also a similar T hangar unit. So from an aerial perspective, it's basically an exact copy of that to the west. Here's a quick look at the construction plans. As noted, this is an 8-unit T hangar. So for those that aren't familiar, a T hangar is basically built to accommodate small general aviation aircraft. So these are smaller single engine piston driven aircraft that can sit in a nested T formation with the wings being the wider portion and the tail the more narrow portion. In terms of the proposed lease terms that we're looking at here with the proposed ground lease, does carry a 35-year base term with one 5-year conditional option. That's consistent with the airport's leasing policy, overall guiding document that we have, and also carries a base ground rent of 35 cents per square foot annually. That's consistent with our current published rates and charges at the airport. The lease also carries CPI adjustments on a biannual basis. In terms of some regulatory and legal background, the airport layout plan, which is the guiding document for the FAA in terms of airport development, does depict locations for multiple T hangar units within this development block. So the proposed development is consistent with the airport layout plan. The applicant, Roots and Wings Aviation, has completed all the required airspace and environmental reviews, which are a big portion of the pre-development and pre-construction process for us at the airport. From a land use perspective, a location and extent land use application was completed in 2022 through La Plata County that did include this proposed development of the North GA area. And the Airport Advisory Commission did review this proposed ground lease and unanimously recommend its approval in their January 2023 meeting without any public comment. From a fiscal impact standpoint, I mentioned the 35 cents per square foot for the proposed ground lease. That would result in an annual base rent of just over $6,000 with the future CPI adjustments. There'll also be water and sewer tap fees of $3,000 per connection, which is consistent with the published rates of the airport. And ultimately, should this hangar move to development, the resulting aircraft utilization would increase fuel flowage fees at the airport, which are another revenue stream for us. In terms of benefits, this produces stable, long-term ground rent income for the airport, produces increased aeronautical use and based aircraft counts at the airport, increases fuel flowage revenues, and is consistent with the strategic plan of the city of Durango, particularly the effective infrastructure network goal and the general goal of the airport to maintain ultimate revenue generation and diversification to ensure our long-term fiscal self-sustainability. So with that, we'd recommend the city council conduct a public hearing, and if no immediate council action is required after the public hearing, because there is later in this agenda an ordinance that would be the proposed next step.
Thank you. Oops, sorry, thank you. No one has signed up who's in the audience to speak at this public hearing. I'm going to open it in case, is there any one from virtually who wishes to speak in the public hearing?
I do not see anyone, Mayor.
Great, I will close the public hearing. Is there any comment or presentation from the Roots and West Wings?
Nope, they're not here tonight.
Great. Is there any questions from council? Are there any questions from council? Excuse me.
Just a comment. You really make your presentations very clear and easy. So thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If there are no questions, we will wait till we're ready for the ordinance and we will vote on it at the ordinance at that time.
Very good.
Great. I know you're next, Tony.
I am.
Stay up there and take it away.
Yes.
This is a public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing a ground lease with Thomas Phelps at the airport.
All right, good evening. Mayor and City Council. Again, Tony Vicari, the Aviation Director for Durango La Plata County Airport. You'll find this presentation fairly similar to the last one with a slight tweak. This is again another public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing a ground lease, in this case with Thomas Phelps at the airport. Quick summary here, slightly different from the last item. Thomas Phelps is an existing lessee at the airport with an existing hangar improvement at the airport. So unlike the prior, which was looking at potential new construction, this is existing occupancy that exists. That current leasehold at the airport does expire in May of 2023. And so this is considering a request that was received by the airport from Thomas Phelps for a new ground lease for those existing improvements. Just as a general overview from the airport perspective, we operate in the space of ground leases, i.e. not owning the hangar improvements. So those are private investment in terms of the capital infrastructure, both in terms of the initial investment as well as the long-term O&M for those particular hangar units. As they work through an amortization schedule for the period of that lease, so referencing back to the prior one, it was a 35-year base term. The expectation is that you generally amortize that investment over the period of that lease effectively. At the end or expiration of any ground lease at the airport will look at any requests for additional occupancy and run it through a series of lenses that I'll talk about here. And we look at, is the use of that parcel still consistent with the airport layout plan? Is it the highest and best use for the overall parcel? Is it something the airport wants to take back in terms of the land or improvements? Overall, the airport here in Durango, we do not own any hangar facilities. Some airports take the tact of owning those improvements and renting them out at market value. However, those do come with some significant O&M costs and obligation in terms of operating those. So we've taken the tact of not owning those and continuing to allow them to be private ownership group with the stable long-term ground rent underneath stream for the airport and basically staying out of the hangar game in terms of the O&M costs. So a little bit of backdrop there. So that's what the case is here. This is a box hangar. It's approximately 50 by 50 in dimension. It's in our south general aviation area, which is different from the north GA we just talked about. The request that was put forward by Thomas Phelps was for a new 30-year ground lease. And as you'll see here, the proposal from airport staff is not for that duration. Instead, it's for a 15-year proposed term. Here you can see a snapshot of what we're looking at. The hangar that is existing, as mentioned, is circled in red there. This is in the South GA zone. It's adjacent to existing additional commercial development, both in between our FBO, which is our fixed-based operator. We're the primary terminal for general aviation aircraft at the airport, as well as another hangar that's subleased out to Flight for Life currently. Those lease terms, as mentioned, is a proposed 15-year base term that was arrived, again, working through the airport's leasing policy as our guiding document. First and foremost, we look at our airport layout plan and ensure that the proposed use of this location is still consistent with the airport layout plan. The ALP does depict this area for aeronautical use and particularly hangar development. So that use was deemed to indeed still be consistent with the ALP at the airport, and no alternative use for that leased premise is currently contemplated. The existing hangar improvements are roughly 35 years of age. We don't know the exact age of them. We weren't able to determine that. So as mentioned earlier, the initial development costs are fully amortized. So therefore, we didn't feel, working through our leasing policy framework, that a full 30-year lease term was warranted based on the fact that those are fully amortized and there wasn't a major lessee investment coming to upgrade those parcel improvements. That being said, the lessee has provided a PE report, professional engineer report, indicating that the structure is in good condition and will last through the duration of the proposed 15-year lease term. And they've also outlined some facility improvements they'll make to improve the structure, both aesthetically and functionally. This does carry a base ground rent of 35 cents per square foot annually, consistent with our published rate, and carries biannual CPI adjustments. From a regulatory and legal side, again, the ALP depicts this area for aeronautical use and specifically for aeronautical aircraft facilities, which is consistent with that existing development that is in place today. The Airport Advisory Commission reviewed this in their January 2023 meeting and again approved it unanimously with no public comment received. From a fiscal impact standpoint, the ongoing ground rent would produce annualized base rent of about $2,300, contributing to the airport's revenue streams, as well as ongoing fuel flowage fees. And again, on the airport benefit side, this creates or maintains rather stable long-term ground rent income for the airport, promotes aeronautical use of the South GA complex at the airport, fuel flowage fee production, and is also consistent with the city of Durango's strategic plan, particularly the effective infrastructure network goal of generating additional revenue for the airport, as well as diversifying those revenue sources to make sure the enterprise fund remains fiscally self-sustainable. So with that, we would recommend that the city council conduct a public hearing to consider any public testimony of this proposed ground lease and subsequent ordinance. No immediate council action is required following the public hearing, as there is an ordinance later on the agenda that will require council action.
Thank you, Tony. With that, I will open the public hearing. No one in the room has signed up to speak. Has anyone virtually raised their hand to speak on this topic?
They have not, Mayor.
Then I will close the public hearing. Is Mr. Wolf here to speak or address any?
Mr. Phelps and also not present tonight.
Okay, great. Any questions from council of Tony? I will echo what the Mayor Pro Tem said. You do a great job giving us all the information we need well in advance. So I appreciate your commitment to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Later, we will have a possible vote under the ordinance section. All right, Ben, I believe you're next. Public hearing to consider revisions to Chapter 3 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Durango related to alcohol beverages, specifically regarding local approval of takeout and delivery permits.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Ben Florine, Deputy Clerk in the City Clerk's Office, and I'm here to provide you background on alcohol takeout and delivery permits and the corresponding public hearing for tonight's meeting. So again, we're here tonight because the Clerk's Office is requesting a public hearing to consider changes to portions of Chapter 3 of the Code of Ordinances pertaining to alcoholic beverages to allow for local approval and issuance of takeout and delivery permits. So what is takeout and delivery? Plain and simple, it authorizes various liquor licensees to do takeout, delivery, or both. Most of these businesses who are eligible to apply for a takeout and delivery permit, most of them have a restaurant style function, except I think the other big notable one is that fermented malt beverage licenses for on-premise and off-premise establishments allow it as well. Those are generally the format of grocery stores. So both city markets have a fermented malt beverage license, so does Walmart. So those types of businesses are only allowed to do takeout. which really looks like a kind of a curbside drop off. If they were to apply for this license, they would maybe be able to do alcohol takeout through their ClickList programs or something similar. We have only two types of licenses can do delivery: arts establishments. We've only had a couple of those in town, and they haven't expressed much interest. But there are a handful of licensees who are expressing interest that kind of fall into the restaurant category. A lot of those have beer and wine licenses or their hotel and restaurant licenses. And we have received a few phone calls and even seen a few permits processed directly through the state so far. So to give you a little background on the timeline of takeout and delivery in Colorado, is takeout and delivery actually started as an emergency procedure during COVID to expand business capabilities and flexibility during the pandemic. And so those services continued for about 1.5 years. And in 2021, Governor Polis actually signed a bill permanently establishing takeout and delivery for liquor licensees in Colorado. The way that the current process works is licensees can apply directly with the state. They fill out a simple form, sign it, and they pay $11 to the state. And the state routes them and the city of Durango a takeout delivery permit. And that happened, I think I said, in the summer of 2021. And we really hadn't seen many permits come through, but in the past 6 months or so, we've started to see an uptick of it. And we thought conversations within the city of Durango and with different managers would be beneficial to us to look at some of the concerns and what solutions could be. So we discussed details of the permits with the city attorney's office, city manager's office, and the police department. And it was determined that prudent local control and monitoring would allow for safe and secure sales in the community. We are a college town. We have a lot of tourists in and out of town, and there's a lot of residents. So a lot of times it's a mixed bag. And the consensus was that we wanted to make sure that we could have standardized takeout and delivery processes and also have a little local oversight as well. So we looked at creating a takeout and delivery permit. We aren't able to charge a permitting fee higher than the state. So we would charge $11. We would also gather the names of the individuals who would be doing takeout and or delivery, and get a copy of their liquor training certificate as well. And there's additional state requirements that are already in place that they would have to go along with, such as IDing the person who actually placed the order. There's different types of seals that have to go on the alcohol containers as well. So there's a bit of state regulations as well that'll be incorporated with ours. But ultimately, we're going to charge a fee, gather the names of the individuals who are making the deliveries, and maintaining that information at the point of renewal each year, or when they initially apply with us. I think the other important thing to say as well is that only the stores who apply for these permits are going to be able to do takeout or delivery. There's no third-party delivery. That ballot measure was defeated back in November at the state level. So, some third-party kind of food drop-off programs, I can't remember the names of them, but not allowed. So, with that said, we wanted to create a local permit to issue to licensees, gathering information that would guarantee safe and responsible sales. And that supports our organization's goal of financial excellence and a high-performing government. So with that said, the recommendation would be to open the public hearing to consider the revisions to Chapter 3 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Durango related to alcoholic beverages, specifically regarding local approval of takeout and delivery permits. And I can answer any questions if needed.
Thank you, Ben. First of all, let's open the public hearing. Has anyone signed up on this? Has anyone virtually raised their hand for wishing to speak?
They have not.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Any questions of Ben?
So
the people that are currently licensed with the state, when they're up for renewal, how would we know about that? And would they come through Durango for the renewals?
Yes, so the state, on the permits they already have issued, they are required to give the local authority a copy of that permit already. So we've been keeping a log of the businesses that have already been issued those permits. I believe it's probably less than 5 or so. So if council chooses to take action and approve approve the ordinance later in the meeting, several weeks down the line, we'll reach out to those businesses and bring them into compliance and get their local paperwork taken care of. And then moving forward, they would renew their permit for $11 each year when their liquor license expires.
So can permits be denied, and how and why?
I think administratively, we would approve these permits if all of the necessary info is there. We're developing a permit application as well that's going to outline the requirements of the employees, their training certificates. So if they submit the paperwork and at face value, they complete our checklist, we'll process it, we'll issue the permit. I think the only point in which a permit would maybe be revoked or denied is if there's a liquor licensee who might already have some violations or issues on the table, either with the Department of Revenue or with the city of Durango. We would probably host a local licensing authority meeting to review that denial. So we usually don't see that too much, if it's pretty rare, but that would be the process for denying or revoking that type of permit.
And how will the businesses with permits verify that they're legal buyers are buying it, like over 21 or whatever is required?
Right. And so the state did outline a few good processes with their version of the takeout and delivery permit. They're required to check photo ID of the person who makes the order. Yeah, it's
but not the person who picks it up.
For whoever, if they're doing takeout or a delivery, whoever's name is on the order is going to be the person who would have to show an ID.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Do you see many local municipalities starting to do this on their own now?
The clerk's listserv that we pay attention to a lot because it allows us to see what other municipalities are doing around the state. There's been a lot of questions about this. I think there's probably only 2 or 3 that I've seen come through those conversations that have chose to do their own takeout and delivery as well.
And is your process and like paperwork and stuff, is it much more is it harder to do for businesses, or is it about the same as the state?
It's going to be, I would say, maybe a hair more robust than the state requirements, again, because we're actually asking for the names of who's going to be doing it and a copy of their training certificate. So it's not going to be hard to fill out, but it'll be a little bit more work than the state application.
Okay, thank you.
I hate to put you on the spot, but can you disclose what organizations or businesses have just suggested that they might be interested in a permit?
I genuinely don't remember them off the top of my head, but I do know that they're exclusively a lot of our downtown restaurants and that type of business format, not so much the grocery stores.
So mostly just restaurants
Correct.
downtown,
Correct.
and they want to be able to provide this deliver and takeout.
Deliver one of their drinks with food to someone's house.
Okay. What is our timeline for this type of process, do you think, if we were to go about it?
Correct. So there's an introduction of the ordinance later in this meeting. And then we would schedule final reading of that ordinance for March 7th. And then I believe it's 10 days after council approves it, or maybe after we post it in the paper, it would go into effect. So we'd probably be looking at about probably at least another month before we go live and have the application ready and are contacting businesses.
Okay, 2 more questions. What type of steps do we take then if we find that there are violations for businesses that we offer these permits to? We just remove, clearly, I would assume we revoke the permit, but.
Right. If we had a report of a violation, we would, like I said, basically try to schedule it for review if necessary, if the police department wanted to. And if our city attorney agreed to it, we would schedule them most likely for a local licensing authority meeting, which is where all of our alcohol and marijuana licenses are reviewed and approved.
Okay, and then, thank you. Last question is, what action will we take if a non-licensed business tried to do takeout and delivery?
Again, just because I don't have a final say on people's licenses, we would schedule that for the local licensing authority. Maybe with some coordination with the Department of Revenue and the Liquor Enforcement Division. A lot of times they pursue action separately as well, so.
Thank you.
The developers, sorry, the liquor purveyors can't lose their license without a hearing. So it would have to go to the LLA. But the whole idea here is to know who's actually doing the delivery, whether they've had the training, and then if you discover that there's been, underage drinking, and, the police get called to some party, you can find out who actually delivered it. So there's a look for some level of accountability. And as Ben mentioned, this does not apply to services like DoorDash or Grubhub. Those are not eligible for the state or local permits.
Thank you, Ben. I have no questions. They were asked by other counselors, so thank you.
I had one more,
Okay.
and it kind of speaks to what Mr. Tuttle just mentioned was, if I understand correctly, a restaurant would have to deliver their own food and their own alcohol. They couldn't hire a third party in between to do so.
Correct. It would need to be their own staff.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One more question. How will you advertise this process and get the word out to the businesses about the application process?
Well, thankfully, we have a huge database of all of our businesses, email addresses, phone numbers, all of that. So we would probably do multiple levels of contacting them through our own channels, but also potentially using the public information office. There's probably a few different ways that we'll reach out and let these businesses know that we now have this permit available.
Thank you, Ben. We'll take up the ordinance later in the agenda.
Thank you.
So our last item under this section is a public hearing to consider land use and development code text amendments. And this is Mallory St. Pierre.
Hi, Mallory St. Pierre, Community Development. So this is for LUDC text amendments. This is a staff initiated request to amend 17 sections of the Land Use and Development Code. They're mostly minor changes to improve clarity, correct minor inconsistencies, and or update the code to reflect how staff has interpreted or applied standards. And then the most substantial change is the addition of a long-term permitting option for food trucks. So I'll run through kind of the cleanup items first. Number 1 clarifies the standards for detached duplexes in the mixed-use neighborhood zone. Number 2 updates food truck setback and spacing requirements to align with the fire code. And number 3 clarifies that the standard applies to any second floor, regardless of whether there's a residential unit in the structure. Number 4 clarifies that the detached garage bonus does not require alternative compliance, nor does development on lots of 25-foot widths. Number 5 reiterates signage standards for automobile canopies. Number 6 are updates per FEMA requirements. Number 7 clarifies that new residential units in the central business zone require parking. Number 8 clarifies that in all cases for non-residential development, a minimum of 1 parking space can be substituted with bicycle parking. And then number 9 eliminates the posting for council meetings. And just to clarify, there's still a mailing and legal notice, but this is for the physical posting on the property. And then it also specifies mailing radii for 2 project types that were missing, and it's using the same as other projects. And then number 10 clarifies the standards that apply for principal buildings in the established neighborhood multifamily zone. So for interior lots, multiple principal buildings are allowed only if they're side by side. If the second unit is behind the first, it has to meet accessory standards. And then for corner or through lots, one principal structure is allowed for each street frontage. And then the most substantial change is regarding food truck pods. So currently there are two options for permitting a food truck. One is as with a temporary use permit, which can be renewed twice, and the other is as an accessory use to another commercial or restaurant use. And so this is providing a long-term permitting option for a food truck independent of another principal use of on the property. So it defines food truck pod as a use, adds it to the use zone matrix, and then identifies applicable standards. There are 4 review criteria that apply to text amendments, and staff finds that the proposed amendments meet all applicable criteria. No public comments regarding this project were received. Planning Commission heard this request during the January 23rd public hearing and recommended approval with a 4-0 vote. And with that, the recommendation is moving to approve the proposed text amendments.
Do we need to wait until later on, or can we do that during this public hearing?
There's not an ordinance coming up.
There's not this time, so that will come later at another meeting.
The motion?
Not the ordinance will come. There's not an ordinance on this meeting, so we are looking for a motion.
Okay, great. Thank you.
On this.
Great. On that, I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone who signed up to speak on this topic who's in the room? Doesn't look like it. Right? Has anyone virtually raised their hand to speak as part of the public hearing?
They have not.
Then I will close the public hearing and open it up for council questions.
Hi, thank you. So regarding the food truck pods, so we're going to long-term now. How does this affect businesses that currently have food trucks on their property?
So right now we have some that through temporary use permits. And then also as accessory to, so I guess to use like 11th Street as an example, there's another permanent use on that property. So
Already.
they're accessory to a bar or coffee shop or something else. And so there's not currently people, I guess we've had more interest in food trucks. And
Okay.
so there's kind of this temporary use option and say on a vacant lot of test out a site, see if it works, but that if it does work and they want to make it permanent, there's really not an option under current code because there's not some other permanent use on the property.
So this then makes
So
it
this
the
is-
permanent option.
Yeah, so it's giving that option if they,
And then they would have to resubmit that application annually at that point? Or,
that would be a permanent, so long as they're meeting their conditions of approval.
thank
They
you.
wouldn't have to renew it unless they may.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question on the noticing within the 300 feet parameters. So I've had a situation where a building went up and the people within 300 feet were notified. But the people whose property was within that 300 feet, but their front door was not within the 300 feet, were not notified. So they were notifying by address and not by actual property location. Does that make sense?
It should be by, if the property is within 300 feet of the.
Right,
parcel.
but the address was not within 300 feet, so the person did not get a notification because their front door was actually not within 300 feet, where their address is. And so even though the parcel was within the 300 feet, not the entire parcel, just parts of it, they didn't receive a notice of a building that was going up, in their area. So will that be clarified? Or-
I think it should, I guess, without knowing where we're talking about, it should be the parcel is building if it's within that 300-foot radius. So I'm not sure why it
Okay,
wouldn't have been. It's just a GIS base, so whether you're, how your house is oriented, it wouldn't change it, if I'm understanding what you're saying.
yeah, I mean, I would think that would be the case, but I also know that it didn't happen that way, so that's why I was wondering. This
I'm
was,
not
this
sure
was
what
several.
happened with
years
it.
ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what happened in that case.
okay.
But this should be 300 feet or is 300 feet from the parcel lines of the subject parcel. And it's out, and so it would pick up any.
So
property.
even if the parcel's address was actually on the other side of on the other side of the block.
Yes, because it should be pulling that parcel.
Just the parcel itself. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have one more question, sorry.
Please go ahead.
For the parking reductions, but the parking credit and reductions, you said you can eliminate one parking place in exchange for providing bicycle parking? How much bicycle parking does it say in that 4.5.2.7?
Yeah, so right now, I guess what this is trying to resolve is that depending on what the parking requirement is for the use, if it's low enough, it's not hitting, it's a minimum of 5%. So they're not hitting the 5% to even get one. So it's a 1 per 3. One parking space can be substituted with 3
parking
bicycle.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's allowing, so when they have lower parking requirements, they're still able to substitute one, and they don't have to have such a large enough parking requirement to be able to use that.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So do we have a motion?
Mallory, I'm impressed with how well you know all this stuff. Thank you. I move to approve the proposed text amendments with the finding that the proposal is consistent with city policies and standards.
I'll second.
And is there any discussion? Then let's have this vote.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mallory. All right, now we'll go into the quasi judicial hearings. The first one, Bryce is on his way up, perfect, is a public hearing to consider a request for an easement from La Plata Electric Association to extend an electrical utility line to service the terminal expansion at the Durango La Plata County Airport.
Council, thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate it. We'll dive into this. This is a request from La Plata Electric Association to create a utility easement at the Durango La Plata County Airport. And that's to service the new terminal expansion that's planned for the airport. This is a project summary. The easement is going to be roughly 200 feet in length, and council approval of the site plan will be followed by a first and second reading if approval is granted tonight. This is a context map of the airport in general. We'll do a zoomed in view now. And you can see the area where the easement will be located. The easement description is over here on the left that shows the route. And then the circled area in red is the general location of where that easement will be located. Also paired with the new terminal expansion. So the relevant strategic plan goal is the effective infrastructure network, and this project will update existing utility infrastructure. There have been no public comments received to date, and the recommended motion is there on the screen for you. Open it to questions.
Thank you, Bryce. With that, I'll open the public hearing. Let's see if there's anyone who signed up. Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Ben. Has anyone virtually raised their hand to speak on this topic?
They have not, Mayor.
I will close the public hearing. Is anyone from La Plata Electric here?
No, they are not.
Okay, and then we'll open it up for questions for Bryce. Great job, no questions.
I got the nod to read. I know Kim's like, Jess. I move to approve the request from La Plata Electric Association to create an easement across city-owned property at the Durango La Plata County Airport for a new electric line to service the new terminal expansion as depicted in the attached documentation, and direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance authorizing the granting of this easement for the first reading at a regularly scheduled council meeting.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Then please call the vote.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Buell.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
And Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you, Council.
The next one, Dan's on his way up. A public hearing to consider the Clements Minor Subdivision, 2375 West Second Avenue. While we're waiting, we can see the Community Development Department's been cranking it tonight.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Daniel Murray, Planner, Community Development. The proposal this evening is a subdivision located at 2375 West Second Avenue, known as the Clements Minor Subdivision. The request is just that, is it a 2-lot split? And I'll go into a little more detail here. The applicant is present and the proposal is to divide the property into 2 lots. The process thus far is it went to Planning Commission. It actually was continued. I can elaborate on that background. There was ultimately a favorable recommendation from Planning Commission in a 3-1 vote. And then the next step is for council this evening. And then the third step would be an administrative final plat to ensure compliance with the conditions. So here we are for context. The property is shown in red outline 2375. You see Needham Elementary on the left side, west of your screen, and then you see the main avenue and the high school parking lot on the right, Junction Creek running through the middle of the screen. Zooming in a little further, we may come back to this image as it's helpful. Shows the subject property in red dashed outline. Weston Drive is actually a road, public road there in the bottom portion of your screen. So the importance of this image, I think, is to recognize properties that do take exclusive access off Weston Drive, and there'll be more discussion about that. I'll actually jump to this next screen and speak to the items on the slide there. So the property as proposed is shown on your left side of the screen. That's the existing home. And the proposal is that new solid line. The existing home is a duplex. It has a second dwelling unit within it that was legalized in 2016. It was estimated to have built in 1994. So they went through the appropriate process to permit and legalize the second unit inside the dwelling. On the right side of your screen, you see the historic Weston subdivision platted in 1947. What's interesting about this image is actually shows just being cut off, but this was city limits in 1947. So this is a reflection of the city growing post-World War, adding more parcels and growing to what it is today. So this was a handful of lots being created. The proposal brings the property line largely back to where it was, give or take a foot or two. What's also changed, as you may notice on the left of the screen, there's a jog in the property line because the neighboring property has a garage. And so that has been adjusted to reflect that. That was done prior to this. The proposal is creating 2 parcels, and I'll jump now to what was the subject of Planning Commission. The Planning Commission continued the project because they wanted an exhibit that showed what could be built on the property. They were having a hard time really understanding, even though staff will articulate as it shows here, the property meets setbacks, both side and rear. They wanted to see the building footprint. So that was continued to allow the applicant to provide this. So now we can walk through how the project is satisfying the land use code standards, starting with parking. Because lot JR, the one to the north, does not have any other frontage other than Second Avenue, the proposal is to dedicate an easement on the rear portion of lot I, 12.5-foot wide easement to allow lot J to have tandem parking. And then lot I would have similar tandem parking right next to that. The other aspects of this exhibit show a right-of-way dedication, which is very typical with subdivision. The city tries to incrementally bring roads up to standard. This is a substandard road, Weston Drive, and the city would gain 3.75 feet of right-of-way along that property line. So you see that. illustrated, and therefore the building footprint shifts in. This is actually considered a corner lot, so we have a 15-foot side yard setback, 5 feet to the north, 20 foot, which is very typical to the street, and then 20 feet to the rear. It's actually greater to account for parking. But this helped Planning Commission, and hopefully you visualize that a home would be placed very similar to the existing home, and this is actually very similar to the alignment of what we see along West Second Avenue. There is a condition to remove the garage because the garage would enable that access for the parking. And as mentioned, now they've sketched in that there is this ADU in the rear portion of the existing building. It's permitted as a duplex, but when a property drops below 7,500 square feet, there is an owner occupancy requirement, and the home is not owner occupied. So there's a condition that reads within 180 days, the owner would either choose to occupy or remove the ADU. And so they can speak to their intentions for the property, but we've given given some options for them to come into compliance based on any approval. And then lastly, there's a condition that there just be small revisions to the plat, typical survey edits. So that is walking through specific aspects of the property. Just to, again, create the illustration that Planning Commission is looking for, about a 1,400 square foot footprint for the building. And if they utilize their most floor area ratio, it'd be about a 2,000 square foot home. And that was helpful for Planning Commission. That's all the information I just discussed. We can go back if it's useful. And looking at our long range plans, the proposal does highlight many goals, in particular creating infill development, and that's infill development that is utilizing existing infrastructure. That is the most efficient pattern of development on existing roads and water and sewer. And also the housing plan encourages the construction of new units, also units. It says here smaller lots. This lot is actually pretty average, but it's also not a big lot. So it fits what are our traditional established neighborhood pattern of housing. To date, we've received 7 public comments. There actually was a comment that came in yesterday. I'll ask real quick the deputy clerk if it was sent to public comments at Durango. Did that get to council?
We had 2 of them that came in through public comment, and we routed them to council. We've actually had a few more trickle in this afternoon that got it as well.
Thank you. The one I was aware of was one Kat Jaffe, and it was a comment that is also in your packet already. So you've received now a running series of comments. The comments generally express concern with access and parking, that there will be an increase in traffic with this proposal, a new home, and additional massing on the property, as well as construction impacts during construction. So those are what were highlighted thus far in the process. I've indicated Planning Commission December 5th ultimately recommended for approval. The one dissenting vote was with respect to access. There was a desire from the Planning Commission member that access should be off Second Avenue, leaving Weston Drive available. Partially, the challenge with, let's see if I can go backward. The challenge with shared access off of Second Avenue is it actually is inconsistent with the land use code. It would take a variance. The way the code is structured is that you need to take access on a lower classification road, and Weston is a lower classification than Second Avenue. It would create a curb cut where one currently doesn't exist. So we're giving up on-street parking, and there's the potential for more conflict when you're bringing in yet another driveway, if you will, over the sidewalk. And there's also a significant amount of grade here. There's a retaining wall next to the sidewalk. So there would be a lot of built improvements to bring parking in and to then create a trickier parking arrangement at the rear of the property. So this was what was arrived at as being the most practical. I've mentioned Planning Commission. Staff recommendation is for approval. You have that there in front of you, and I'm available for any questions. The applicant is also here. They have a small presentation, so you can anticipate that.
Very good. Thank you, Daniel. We'll see if there anyone in the audience has signed up to speak at this. There's a piece of paper with some names on it. Great. So we'll open the public hearing, and you'll have Actually, there's somebody first. Chris Chambers? Chambers, yes, Chris Chambers. So you come to the microphone and if you indicate if you live in the city, the county or elsewhere. And I'm trying to get the 3 minutes to show up on the screen. And I will try to wave and catch your attention when it's about 30 seconds left. So, Mr. Chambers?
Chambers. Yes, my name's Chris Chambers. I am the owner and reside at 205 Western Drive, which is immediately to the west of this proposed subdivision. I've lived in Durango for 17 years and I have owned and lived in this home since 2010 with my daughter and purchased this property in part because of the quiet enjoyment it provides for being situated in town Durango. I'm opposed to the Clemens subdivision of lot I-J and the Weston subdivision into lots I-R and J-R for the following reasons. The main access and egress to these lots, as well as the parking, is via the east end of Weston Drive. City of Durango only has a 12.5-foot easement through mine and others lots on this block of Weston. As Durango's population has increased, the usage of this section of Weston has significantly increased. And additional residential traffic on this section of Weston will create obstacles for evacuation of residents. If a major emergency such as a wildfire were to occur, I remember very vividly last May looking at the plume from the Parents Peak fire and thinking how close that was. I would also add that the proposal essentially creates a landlocked parcel whereby the person purchasing the lot will have to grant easement to the lot to the north. Just seems, and it's inline parking, as has been pointed out by city staff. This section of Weston Drive is a substandard street, right? So the city's only got a 12.5-foot easement through there. And at present, with snow removal, the effective width of this street is more like 9 to 10 feet right now. City services such as trash and recycling will not come down our street at this point. We have to wheel our cans up to West 3rd Avenue. I feel like issues such as these would just be magnified with the addition of another residence on such a small lot. Snow removal and specifically where to put shoveled or plowed snow will be made considerably more difficult by an additional lot and proposed house on our block of Weston. At present, yeah, I just mentioned it's the effective width is 10 feet. Taking into account the required city setbacks, which city staff did present a minute ago, it's just going to likely result in a really tall structure that's going to obscure the quality view to the east that our blocks of residents currently enjoy. If you looked at the aerial photograph, 25 seconds, gotcha. Construction of said proposed house would negatively affect this block's residents' ability to access their property, access to city services and parking. It is worth noting that every neighboring property owner has objected to this proposed project. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to comment on this proposed project, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. The next person signed up to speak is Sweetie Marbury. Please come to the microphone.
My name is Sweetie Marbury and I live on West 2nd. In fact, I live just a few houses from the Clements property. I support the Clements project. Precedence has been set when Mayor Pro Tem Youssef was on a different city council. There was a single family resident at 18th and West 2nd, and it was requested to subdivide it into 3 lots. And that city council approved the 3-lot subdivision. And now 3 happy families live on small lots. This project meets the land use code requirements. Each day on Nextdoor app, there are requests for housing. We all know housing is in demand in Durango. I've lived on this street for almost 50 years, and I support infill, just as I believe you support infill. This project will meet the goals of housing. The new resident will face Brookside Park, and recycling and trash is on West 2nd. It's not on Weston. When we face the 2nd, when we're on 2nd and we face here come the trucks down the street. Access off of West Second is problematic because West Second is a very busy street with the high school. So asking them to do a curb cut and then the retaining wall seems like a big process to me. And I can appreciate the tandem parking. I have to back out of my little house, my little driveway. And it is a busy street. You know, I'm looking 3 ways most of the time. So I can see parking on Weston would actually be a lot safer than what I have to do to get out of my driveway. So I know the neighbors on Weston, and I appreciate their thoughts and comments. Weston is a very small street in terms of maybe 1, 2, 3 houses there. And you all know Weston. It has been upgraded through the infrastructure just a few years ago, or repaved, and which has made a huge difference. It's not a busy street. People don't normally cut through Weston. When they pick up their kids at Needham, they just go around the corner. So Weston is sort of a very quiet and lovely place to live, as we all love Durango. So I do support infill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marbury. The next person, I can't quite read the last name, but it is Catherine Demichi Jaffe. Sorry about that. Please come to the mic.
She was a queen,
Uh-huh.
as am I. Okay. How many people have visited Weston Drive in person? Please raise your hands. Walked up and down the street. Anybody else out there? Excellent. So I moved there in 2021. My name is Catherine Jaffe. I live at 210 Weston Drive, and I'm grateful that you've made the space for us to talk about what our lived experiences are like on that road. About 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And as soon as I could leave the 200 days of isolation that I had to go through during the COVID-19 pandemic, receiving my treatment, I chose Weston Drive as the place where I would have my recovery. I chose it because it was quiet. I chose it because it was a wildlife corridor. I chose it because it was a small street. It is a hard place to back out of. I know, because I'm one of those kind of landlocked homes, and my option is to back into Chris's front yard. There are no other places for me to park. I've gotten 5 parking tickets on 2nd Ave. And I had to park there because there was I couldn't remove the snow from my yard. There are more than 6 homes that touch Weston Drive, and it is an active street full of pedestrians, of my dogs, of me. And the idea that this place that has become an improved quality of life for me is now going to be busier, that there will be construction, that a big tree was cut down to usher this in. It's hard. It's tough because this decision, and I have friends who are my age who want to live here too, but we all acknowledge that Weston Drive is not like other roads in Durango. It's just not. It doesn't get to fall through the same categorization as everything else because it's a little different, and it's wonderful to live there, but it's also a little more challenging. And so I'm grateful for all of you for listening to our experiences there, and for considering that unless you walk there, unless you live on that road, it's really hard to categorize it as everything else. I'm sorry, this is so emotional because it's like already I'm wondering, like, do I need to go somewhere else to find the peace if it gets more crowded? And at what point do we evaluate the quality of life for people who live here versus try and consider how many more people we cram into an already very crowded place? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jaffe. Has anyone virtually raised their hand to speak?
They have not, Mayor.
Great, I will close the public hearing, and I understand the applicant is here and would like to speak. Daniel, would you like to bring them up and do have a presentation? And as applicants, council may also ask you questions.
You can click the mouse or go forward.
Thank you.
My name is Dot Clemens. I am the property owner of 2375 West Second Avenue, the property we're talking about. I bought the house in 2016 as a double city lot. And knowing that this was an opportunity that I had as a young single mom of a 3-year-old little boy at the time. So West Second Avenue, what was and is a sacred little haven that I loved living at, and I have the desire to subdivide this lot in part because of what a neat little spot that it is. This is the current home that is on Lot J. Lot I would be where potentially a new home would be built. And Daniel went over that with you guys. This is my now husband. I am married. Shane Siegel is an engineer, and he put together those little spreadsheets.
Hi there, I'm Shane Siegel, a longtime Durango resident, about going on my 25th year now. We put together a little table here. We won't get into too much detail because we don't need to, I don't think at this point. But multiple comments were brought in from neighbors about this lot not being appropriate, the size of it not being appropriate. I think city staff brought that up, but what we did was we went ahead and put together some of those metrics just so everybody could actually see that the proposed lot is very consistent with what is in the Weston subdivision now. And very specifically, the square footage is consistent, kind of in the middle of some of the different lots. Footprint size, very consistent, if not in the middle. The street frontage there and the lot depth are just columns that give you a little bit more information, because really what we need to see is columns 7 and 8 that talk about the buildable area of some of these lots. And very specifically, those last 2 columns are the lots associated that we're speaking about now. And once again, you can see those are really consistent with what's out there. So we can jump into this with more detail if there's any questions as we get going, but we want to keep going to keep it brief for you.
There were just a lot of questions on this for our second rendition of Planning Commission, so.
And this is the end of your presentation. I just want to be clear on that.
A couple more slides.
Couple more, and then we'll open it up to
I
questions.
just wanted to discuss parking. Parking came up a lot. So this is what the parking would look like, again, as Daniel went over. The neighboring garage, Chris Chambers Garage, encroaches on this land, and I gifted him that land when I purchased this property because I wanted to be a good neighbor. And so that does stick out a little bit, but otherwise the parking is tandem. And as you see, we did go and take a number of pictures of West Second Avenue to show what it looks like often during the days, time stamped these. This was on December 7th, 7:51. That one truck there is my husband's. He's there taking the picture. This, you can still see a number of spots are open and available. This is a busier time of day, 1:17 p.m. Still, again, there's multiple spots open and available. This is another day on a weekend, 12:16 p.m. And this is what it looks like when it's recently snowed. So I just wanted to summarize by saying, started this process in 2016, have worked countless hours with staff, with various planners, staff turnover. And I really believe strongly that we have met all of the LUDC code requirements and are aligned with the spirit of the strategic plan. So open for any questions you may have.
Thank you. And with that, I will open it up for questions from council.
I had a question for staff, I think, probably. Daniel, thank you. Thank you for presenting to us. Appreciate it. So if I understood correctly, originally when this area was platted, it was platted for 2 lots in that space. And then, and at some point in the past, there was a change to that made it 1 lot. Am I correct?
Yeah, I believe it's just, they own both lots and they're described as 1 lots I and J of the historic subdivision.
But were there 2 parcels originally? And now there's only 1 parcel and we're trying to go back to 2 parcels?
Correct.
Okay. The property to the north, the original piece, would there be space for a garage to be built behind the house? Would that meet the
We could
setbacks?
look into potentially, yeah, if there's adequate setbacks. Possibly.
Could we look at the?
Share screen. Let's go. Maybe this exhibit. It would be 3-foot rear setback for an accessory structure. So, and it's interesting, the property line actually jogs, so there's a little more room to the northwest portion of it.
But do you think that there, if maybe even just a 1-car garage, if someone wanted to build one there at some time, would
Yeah,
that be
and
possible?
an even more successful option could be attaching it to the home, so then it's utilizing the most rooms possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll just say I appreciate the parking here. I feel like the second parking would be a nightmare with the retaining wall and then the foot traffic that's on that street from the high school and even Miller, like the kids that walk down there. It's so busy. And so I think that second would be no bueno. So I think the parking over there is better. I will say, I recognize buying a piece of property and I own a home and you buy it with the thought that like, this is what you're buying. But like I live next to commercial property and that could get turned into a hotel tomorrow or, and you don't have control over it. And I get it. I will say I am appreciative that we are getting a little bit more roadway in this purchase or setback for that potential coming up to make that road better. I have walked that road many a times and I know this area pretty well. And it is a gem and, once construction's through and I mean, I also, you have to appreciate, someone that has bought this piece of property and the ability, when you own your property that you can build and change and grow and make the most of it. And it's a catch-22. And so once the construction's done, hopefully your gem of a street is just as good, if not better than it was before. So.
Are there any other questions or can we have the motion back up on the screen? Oh, comment, please go ahead.
Okay, were you gonna?
No, go ahead, be my guest.
Yeah, I just appreciated staff's report. Thank you very much. And the overview of the project and the review criteria focusing on access, parking, site planning, density, and engineering comments. And, the fact that it meets all the applicable criteria and the LUDC, I appreciate that. I really appreciate the Planning Commission's, conversation about it and their big review. I recognize it's difficult when we start talking about larger density in our community. It does have its impacts on our established neighborhoods, but it is in accordance with our strategic plan, and I appreciate you bringing that out as well. So thank you very much.
Sorry. I would move to approve the 2375 West Second Avenue Clemens minor subdivision with the finding and conditions as outlined in the staff report and discussed at this public hearing.
I'll second.
Under discussion, I would like to at least make a comment. Thank you for the work, for trying to be creative, working with the applicant to find a possible solution. So I want to commend the staff, the applicant for this. I also want to thank the community for coming out and sharing your views. I think that's an important part of the process as well. So thank you. Is there any other discussion?
I do agree with Mayor Pro Tem Youssef that it does support our strategic plan and I understand. I mean, I live in a very weird area. I have 64 unit apartment complex across the street from me and a 77 brand new 7-unit apartment complex across the street from me. And I have a commercial building, one house over, and I have one house next to me. And I understand the hodgepodge that sometimes happens and the challenges there, but I firmly believe that our community needs housing. And I think that the community that we all have and love and appreciate will no longer exist if the only people who can afford to live here are retirees and wealthy people. And I don't think that's where we want to have children grow up and families live and have a multi-generational mixed income community. And I firmly believe the only way to do that is to be able to do infill. So I really appreciate this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Baxter, for those comments. Is there any other discussion? Then let's have the vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Yes.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes. Thank you, Daniel. All right, one more. Deanna Armentano. Did I get it right? Okay. A public hearing to consider the Golf Minor subdivision, 3001 West Second Avenue.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan Armentano with the Community Development Department. Good evening. This is another lot split in EN2, not too similar from the one you just looked at. This is the Goff Minor subdivision, so I'll dive right into it. Relatively simple subdivision of a dual frontage lot in established neighborhood 2, and I'll show you what that means here in just a second. We'll create 2 corner lots. Most of the block in this area has already been subdivided in this manner. Both new lots comply with LUDC requirements for minimum lot size and street frontage. There will be a need for some public improvements along West 3rd, which will complete a sidewalk, which I'll show you in a second as well. And the applicant will need to provide on-site parking for the existing home as there is none. There's a context map showing the property outlined in red. So this is West 30th here, Main Ave, North Main Ave over here, Tanque Verde, just for some landmarks to orient you all. And then if we zoom in a little closer. So this is the subject property, 3001 West 2nd Ave. It's dual frontage because it has frontage on both West 3rd and West 2nd Avenue, as do the lots to the north, which have also been subdivided in a similar manner. There's also frontage on 30th Street, which is why it's going to be 2 corner lots. The only other thing I'll point out on this slide, 2 things actually, is here's the sidewalk connection that's missing. So that will be constructed as part of this. And then the applicant will be providing a new driveway and surface parking on his lot, kind of between the house and the existing shed there. So here's the proposed plat. Again, you can pretty clearly see here how it's going to be split in a comparable manner to the parcels to the north. So we're creating a lot Y and a lot Z. Both parcels are in excess of the 4,000 square foot minimum lot size for the zone, and both have well in excess of the minimum 35-foot frontage for the zone as well. Just briefly on the comp plan and strategic plan alignment. The comp plan has a future land use density future land use classification of low density residential, which is actually inconsistent with the LUDC and is something we may be addressing here down the line. Beyond that, it does broadly promote new housing opportunities and compatible infill development. And then the strategic plan, this proposal broadly aligns with the AEO objectives in that it creates a new housing opportunity on a modestly sized parcel. Planning Commission reviewed this back on January 23rd. They found the subdivision to be in compliance with the LUDC standards. They recommended approval on a 4-0 vote. There have been no public comments on this proposal either during any public hearing or in writing. So just to conclude, again, pretty simple subdivision request, meets LUDC standards with some pretty typical conditions. The proposal will get us a completed sidewalk segment there and as through those public improvements, and the lot layout is consistent with the neighborhood. So that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Does anyone?
Oh, I'm not on, sorry. Thank you, Dan. Has anyone in the room signed to speak during public hearing? All right, I will open the public hearing in case there is anyone virtually who wishes to speak to this project.
There is not.
Then I will close the public hearing. And I don't believe the applicant is,
I believe the applicant is here virtually if you have any questions for him.
okay,
That's Randy
great,
Goff. Yep.
but does not wish to just.
Doesn't have a presentation.
Perfect. Then I will open it up for questions from council. Oh, I closed the public hearing, excuse me. Then I'll open it up for questions from council. You gave a straightforward presentation.
I'll move to approve the Goff Minor subdivision, subject to the conditions of approval described in the staff report.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Then let's have this vote.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Buell.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem
Yes.
Mayor Nosworthy.
Yes, thank you. And again, a huge thank you to the community development staff. We're working with our applicants and finding creative solutions. On to ordinances. The first one is an ordinance, we've heard about it earlier, an ordinance authorizing a ground lease with Roots and Wings Aviation LLC for aircraft hangar T5, excuse me, at the airport and declaring an effective date. Interim city attorney, did you have anything you wanted to say about this ordinance?
No, this has been designated ordinance O-2023-03.
And does council have any questions of the interim city attorney?
I'll move to approve ordinance O-2023-03.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Then let's have this vote.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
Mayor Nosworthy.
Yes. All right.
Okay, you know, Mayor, how I told you earlier, I would tell you when I was wrong.
Oh, good.
I think I got the ordinance wrong on this.
Oh, all right.
We can redo it.
I appreciate a
And I
city
saw an
attorney who
email
could have
from you earlier,
admitted.
And I have two of them numbered 03, and I know that's not what you sent me.
Let's just take a minute there.
Yes.
How refreshing.
Yeah, and actually, for Roots and Wings, I'm seeing that as ordinance 02, 2023-02 for this year. Apologize if there was
I don't think it's your mistake, Ben.
no problem.
Yes.
Can I, I'm gonna amend my motion to approve ordinance O-2023-02.
And I will second the amended motion.
And I'll see if there's any discussion. And if not, we'll have this vote. Please call the vote.
Counselor Buell.
Yes.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Nosworthy.
Yes, thank you. On to item 12.2, an ordinance authorizing a ground lease with Thomas Phelps for aircraft hangar 1334 at the airport and declaring an effective date. Again, interim city attorney, did you have anything to just say about this ordinance?
Well, if I get it right, this will be ordinance O-2023-03.
Right. Does council have any questions for the interim city attorney?
I'll move to approve ordinance O-2023-03.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Then let's call this vote.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Buell.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
And Mayor Nosworthy.
Yes. One more item, and item 12.3, under this section. An ordinance revising chapter 3 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Durango related to alcohol beverages, specifically regarding local approval of takeout and delivery permits. Again, interim city attorney, do you have anything to present on this
Only
ordinance?
that this is what council discussed earlier and would allow the clerk's office to prepare a form for licensing and a mechanism for licensing at the local level and charge only $11 to do that. And this will be ordinance O-2023-04.
Thank you. Any questions for the interim city attorney?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance O-2023-04.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Then please call the vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
Counselor Buell.
Yes.
Counselor Baxter
Yes.
and Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes, thank you. Getting to the end of our agenda, but saving the best for the end reports and presentations and decisions. So this is discussion and possible action concerning a resolution supporting the proposed donation of the 49.42 acre Romad parcels for purposes of Animas River Greenway North Preservation. Amy, I believe you'll be presenting. Thank you. And this is not an open hearing presentation.
There will be action taken.
Members of council, while we're getting the presentation up, my name's Terry Nycombe, Parks and Recreation Director. With me tonight is Amy Schwartzbach, our Natural Lands Manager, who is going to talk about this potential land acquisition. It's been an acquisition many years in the making, and Amy has been working diligently within the last several months and years to make this happen. So I will turn it over to Amy.
Thank you. Yes, as Terry mentioned, very, very excited to be bringing this to council tonight. Since the adoption of the city's first open space master plan in 2001 and the formal establishment of our open space advisory board in 2002, that's the predecessor board to our current Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board. The city staff have been working closely with the advisory board and city council to prioritize preservation efforts along the Animas River Greenway. Our community has identified over and over again that preserving the Animas River Greenway is our highest priority for land preservation. The passage of our Open Space Parks and Trails Fund ballot measure in 2005 enabled the city to establish a formal land acquisition program and actively preserve priority lands. This particular project, as Terry alluded to, I found some more files. This dates back to the early 2000s for us, when city staff was initiating negotiations to purchase the property. Since that time, several incredible acquisitions have happened in other locations along the Animas River Greenway, and we haven't been able to close the deal on this project yet. So I'm here on behalf of the Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board and the Parks and Recreation Department to ask council to accept this land donation, which will further the preservation of our Animas River Greenway. This project aligns perfectly with the city's mission, vision, and values, as well as our strategic goal to contribute to enhanced livability and sense of place. The continued land and natural resource preservation stewardship this project contributes greatly to our high quality of life, our vibrant economy, and a healthy environment, not to mention a healthy community. So 3 key ingredients to consider for this project. Preservation. With the acceptance of this incredible land donation, the city may preserve a large undeveloped parcel of very pristine and very desirable Animas River front property. Maintenance can't be overlooked in the project and the planning. So one of the first steps we will do after council hopefully approves accepting this is have an environmental assessment of the property and then a much more thorough site evaluation to drive our planning for stewardship and maintenance of the property. We anticipate including weed mitigation, fire mitigation, and potentially riverbank stabilization. Staff will work with our community and advisory boards and council to develop a vision for any future uses, such as the expansion of the preserve, extension of the river trail, or any additional recreational access. This process, we anticipate mirroring the process that we had for Oxbow Park and Preserve. Lastly, budgeting. So immediate stewardship and management of the property will be undertaken using the 2023 approved funds and staffing levels. Staff are currently working toward an open space and trails maintenance vision and plan. This effort will take into account this additional acreage should we accept this donation. That will ensure future budgets and staffing capacities incorporate taking care of this very nice piece of property. So as I mentioned, city staff have been involved in ongoing negotiations over the years for various reasons. This has never come to fruition. The landowners are now at a different point in their life and have decided to make a charitable contribution to our community. They recognize how valuable parks, open space, and trails are and want to give back. So there was a map in the agenda packet, making sure it's here for your review at this time. The preservation of this tract along the Animas River corridor in its natural condition will continue a healthy watershed, recreational opportunities, and wildlife habitat. The city undertook a very engaged public process to plan Oxbow Park and the park has been very popular for river recreation, and after 9 years of conducting research in partnership with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we've been doing a bird productivity and survivorship study. We have indications of great biodiversity in the preserve, and I'm sure that extends onto this adjacent land. Last year's bird banding study, they observed 70 species. That's the highest yet in that study. That's an incredible number of bird species in one small area, indicating how valuable protecting riparian areas along the Animas River are. So how did we get here? As I mentioned, city staff have been identifying the Animas River Greenway along with public engagement processes since our 2001 plan prioritized the Animas River. The negotiations, they kept going, have never been successful. I have very, very extensive files of every step that we have done to try to get to this point. As I mentioned, the landowners are now older and see value in giving back rather than negotiating a cash purchase transaction this time. So the donation is being negotiated to include the city paying all due diligence expenses as well as the outstanding property taxes. In your council agenda documents, we have an estimated $16,000. I've been working with the finance department. We do need to get a new appraisal for the property. The last time the city paid for an appraisal was back in 2012. So I need to amend our ask and ask for $21,000 so that we can also have a new appraisal done. The value that both of those 2012 appraisals placed was approximately $1.48 million for the two parcels that we're acquiring. So we'll get that new value before closing the deal and bring that back to council in an update. So with this, we would like to recommend that City Council by motion approve the attached resolution authorizing the acceptance of the Romad investment property. The folks behind it are Madeline and William Waters. So I do want to make sure that we're using their name, not just the name of their trust. And that council direct our city manager to close on the acquisition.
Very good. And thank you for those years of work. Does anyone on council have a question or questions?
No questions. I just want to thank you so much for your dedication and hard work over, the last years trying to get this property, and what an amazing gift that Madeline and William Waters are.
Perfect name.
Yes.
Yes.
Are giving the city of Durango, and what an amazing expansion this will be to an already beautiful location that we have in our city. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, I want to say thank you too. Since 2010, when I was on the Natural Lands Board, we've been talking about this piece of property in conjunction with Oxbow, these two pieces of property. One of the biggest challenges was there was no way to manage it. And so Oxbow was impacted by the lack of management of Romad. So this will really bring about a great way of managing the properties together in a beneficial way for the community. And I am so thankful to the family for doing this. It's great. I know the Natural Lands Board was overjoyed. And so with that, we can have discussion. Can you put the motion back up, please? I would move that we approve the attached resolution authorizing the acceptance of the Romad Investments property donation and direct the city manager to close on the acquisition.
I'll second.
And I'll open it up for discussion.
Thanks. I too just wanted to reiterate my thanks. You guys said it well. But what a huge gift for our community. I know already Oxbow Park is so well used with fabulous trails in there. And I think that staff, you have done a really good job of setting the rules and making them very clear. Seems to me that people take good care of the area. And so I believe you, so I hope we can maybe just expand all those rules throughout that area, but I'm sure you guys will make that decision. And yeah, just great gift. I hope that there's something that we can do to recognize and acknowledge the donors.
They have asked that we attach their name, so the Waters Park Preserve, however we incorporate that, but we do intend to incorporate that.
And the memorandum of agreement that's proposed does include a commitment by the city to recognize the water's contribution.
Thank you.
And I would just like to jump in. I have a friend who's an incredible wildlife photographer and is often in that area and tells me that she has seen bear coming off Animas Mountain down into that area as well as mountain lions. And so part of also what makes Durango unique and special is our connection to the wildlife, bird life, wildlife in this area. And I think this will go a long way to creating a bit of a larger buffer. I know that I will say to the community, I was curious, I know CDOT controls the highway, but what would it take to get a wildlife crossing similar to other areas? Because coming from Animas Mountain to the water is, animals are doing it with frequency. So I don't know if that'll be a part of your effort to look at. Like right now, let's accept the property. And then let me give a huge thanks to the Waters family. This is a wonderfully generous donation, which will, their name will be associated with, and it'll be a legacy that I hope they're very proud of. Thank you. Now I believe we can have the vote.
Counselor Buell?
Yes.
Counselor Baxter?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef?
Yes.
And Mayor Noseworthy?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Amy, for your work.
All right, we are on to council reports and actions. So
Looks like Parks and Rec is the first one on the list.
it is, and natural lands, I think those are both yours.
Yes, they are. So the Parks and Rec Board meeting on February 8th. We discussed the strategic planning update and discussion and about how creating a strategic plan for the Parks and Rec would flow from the city's strategic plan and would have performance metrics. And Mayor Noseworthy, you'll be happy to know that we discussed recreation other than physical recreation. And that the board members totally appreciated that comment or the suggestion of including that into their discussions and agreed with it. So we'll see how that gets included.
Pinnacle.
Talked about the parks inventory and future needs assessment tool, which we all got the presentation on. The boards and commissions possible reorganization, which I talked to you about earlier today, and a few other projects. So all is well in that. Well, I don't know if all is well in that department, but we had a good meeting. Natural Lands Board. So we also talked about the reorganization of the boards and commissions, and the Natural Lands Board asked, what can we do to help? What do we need to finish off and complete? And they were very understanding of what we were trying to accomplish. They also talked about the Parks and Recreation strategic plan because there's also going to be an open space natural lands plan eventually, which will be great, as well as a maintenance subcommittee. One of the other things that we talked about, that council has talked about recently, is how do we determine how much more open space we want or need and why and how? So they were developing a a matrix about how to determine like how to score things and what's first, second, third, and weighted averages and all that. So like landscape connectivity, sizes, closeness to schools, opportunities to enhance existing facilities, those kind of things. Then there was natural resources. So how does it add to our natural resources, scenery, ecological function, things like that, habitat, biodiversity? How does it meet the poster master plan goals? Does the project support demographic equity? So again, Mayor Noseworthy, you'll appreciate that that's in on this project here. So as we all do. Is it within a priority preservation area? Does it have economic benefits? Those kind of things. So they're trying to figure out a way to determine, like, why would we buy a piece of property? Why might one rank higher than the other? Because that conversation does come up. And how do you choose? It isn't just the dollar value, it's the other values and goals around it too. So I'm excited that that's in the works. And I think that's all I have to say. Well, of course, we talked about the Roman property, so everybody was very excited. That's it.
Wonderful. Multimodal, Counselor Bosman's is not here, so I do not believe anyone else would have attended and have an update on that. And the La Plata County Airport, and then I'll have a few things, and Melissa, I think you might too.
So I was casually dying on Thursday when the airport, you can tell I'm getting over a cold. And so I did not attend the airport meeting, and I have not listened to the minutes. Can I report back on it? It doesn't, I mean, I could read the agenda that they talked about, but okay.
Come back to us.
Okay, I'll listen to the meeting minutes this week and then I will report back next. So sorry. I felt like it on Thursday.
And besides, Tony got some ordinances passed this week, so he's busy. And
Yes.
Melissa.
So thank you. Is it okay if I go? So I'm gonna do a corrected statement from my library advisory board meeting post or discussion at our last council meeting. I wanted to set the public record straight in regards to that discussion that I discussed it during our meeting, referring to our library advisory board meeting on January 18th, 2023. During this meeting, I took the time to confirm the facts around the 2023 library budget with our library director. Since Councilor Bosman's post was in regards to the budget numbers, and I wanted to clarify the actual facts, and that is what I did. So I wanted to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to set the public record straight. For me, it's very important to make these clarifications publicly. If there is any ambiguity, to set it straight for the record, and I think this is exactly what I did. And what I'm hoping is that going forward, and before I even say that, but I did have an hour-long phone conversation with Olivier after the meeting. And I told him at that time that anytime going forward, if I see that there is inaccurate information, what I believe or perceive to be inaccurate information or misleading information, that I will feel an obligation to bring it up publicly in a meeting, because that is exactly how I think that we need to handle ambiguity and items that need clarification. And I hope that this will help. And I hope that, other counselors might use this avenue. If there's some ambiguity, use this opportunity to make to set the public record straight in public, which is exactly what I'm hoping to do here now. So again, to set the public record straight, what I discussed during that meeting was a clarification of the facts. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem, for that clarification and for standing up to make certain that the public has accurate information to make informed decisions with. We had a retreat this it was last week, and we were there, all of council was there looking at prioritizations of issues. We will be having some follow-up coming back from the city manager with some possibilities of ways to fund those priorities. So I thought that was very helpful. And I would also encourage you, as part of the process, several of you wrote to me or contacted me or into council about today's study session, and I would encourage you to listen to that study session. I think it's a very valuable way to talk about how we as a council can act as a body. So I encourage you to do that. And I will end, because I'm staring at the chief, by encouraging and asking people, please help us prevent some theft. Lock your cars. Thank you. On that note, we will adjourn.